What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Cron's Patriots Talk Podcast. The joint practice with the Philadelphia Eagles is in the books. Up next, Thursday night's game against these Eagles. Phil Perry alongside. Phil, should I give him the good news or the bad news first?
Give him the bad news first, Tom.
Abhorrent performance by the offense. Unwatchable, sloppy. Should I give him the good news?
Sure.
Good news is at least now they know how far they have to go. And also good news, the defense was representative against a very good Philadelphia Eagles offense, at least one that was good for the lion's share of 2023 and is really loaded too. But the story of the day, unfortunately, becomes the mistakes Phil reel through the litany of numbers.
So just overall, between Jacoby Brissett and Drake Maye periods, and they got most of the work, Joe Milton got a period at the very end, I counted 15 total sacks, 9 penalties, and you had 2 interceptions by Jacoby Brissett. So at least Drake Maye didn't throw one, if you're looking for silver linings. Now, Jacoby Brissett, even one of those picks was a drop by Austin Hooper. It should have been a touchdown during a red zone period. But it was as sloppy as you made it sound off the top, Tom. I mean, you can't have that number of flags flying on, it felt like, every third play. If you're not talented enough, if you don't have the physical gifts necessary to compete, to contend on the offensive side, which I think we all would argue they don't, you can't then be sloppy on top of it.
So what's the answer to this? Because I'm sure some folks are wondering, well, were these sins of omission, false starts, things preventable, or were they sins of commission, where you're getting beat and you have to make a play, grab a jersey, leg whip somebody, pummel them with a baton?
This was a potpourri. This was a little bit of everything when it comes to the stinky version of the potpourri. I would say you had multiple false starts, so let's start there. You know, is that because offensive linemen feel as though if they don't get a little bit of an early jump that they don't have a chance against somebody on this Eagles defensive line? It's hard for us to get inside their heads. But you had multiple false starts. You had multiple holds. You had a face mask on a running back at one point and pass protection that still led to a blown-up play. You had an offensive pass interference on a receiver that probably might not go down in the book somewhere where they're tracking this, somewhere in the walls of One Patriot Place, because there was a hold on the play, and the pass rusher who actually got held actually got through for a sack anyway. So
they had another guy who just walked right through. Wasn't a penalty, but just we saw this 2 years ago with the Matt Patricia-led offense where guy just willed himself invisible at the line of scrimmage and walked into the backfield.
Right between the center and the guard and the A-gap there, and it looked like Kevin Harris should have seen him and said, well, if that guy drops out, then I'm okay. But if he rushes, I got to block him. Or one of those guys, he must have thought the center or the guard had him. Neither did. Linebacker walks right through, puts his hand on Drake Maye's shoulder pad as if to say, is this what you guys consider a real pass protection plan here? Because it's not working for you. Yeah, so it was a little bit of everything. It would be hard to pin it on one player, but we're going to have our stock up, stock down a little bit later, Tom.
We will do that in one quick second. I actually should set the scene just a smidge. We're a couple minutes in. The Patriots started the practice on a separate field. The Eagles were on the other one. They went through their dynamic stretching, their normal drills that a team does to get ready for practice. And then I would say probably around 11:30, maybe 11:45, 15, they joined and started doing one-on-ones. And the one-on-ones, the Patriots looked pretty good. Especially the passing one-on-ones that we're watching. The offense is going to win virtually every single rep. The players, unless you're in the red zone, the wideouts, the backs, they have the entire field to work with and a quarterback who's not facing a rush. Eventually, somebody's going to get open. So we did see some nice throws by Drake Maye, who settled in after some sketchy ones at the start. His best one was to Jalen Polk, who made a diving catch in the end zone, about a 40-yard catch, hands catch, tucked it, rolled, beautiful play. What Phil's referring to, and the 7-on-7 wasn't atrocious, it's the 11-on-11, when the two teams are huddling up, going to the line of scrimmage, operating as if it's a preseason game. And Jacoby Brissett got the lion's share of the reps today. We're expecting Drake Maye will get a lot of them in the game. I wonder, though, if this gives some pause when you have 15 sacks, ostensibly, in a practice.
I agree with you with the one-on-ones, and I actually think that is somewhat encouraging, for guys like Jalen Polk to go down the field and make plays on a secondary that has some talented players. I mean, they're not a disgraceful secondary at all. Now, I know they had holes at corner going into the draft. They actually drafted 2. One of them, Cooper DeJean, is still hurt, but they drafted 2 up high because they knew they had problems there. Still, I think, you could take something away from that. And the offensive line was not horrible in the one-on-ones. Mike Owenu beat Jalen Carter, who had a heck of a practice. Jalen Carter was, after that loss to Mike Owenu in the one-on-ones, was pretty much unblockable the rest of the day because it wasn't just the sacks and it wasn't just the penalties. I would say even on the run plays, and they're not tackling to the ground, but there were way too many, in my opinion. I would love to know what they think. There were a couple runs that they were able to spring for what looked like sizable gains, but there were a lot of what looked like 1-yard gains, no gains, tackles for loss on the early down portions of what they were practicing out there. And for a team that's expected to be a run-first team and really rely on the run and then throw some play action after that, I would not say it was an incredibly encouraging day when it came to their run game.
We had Brian Hoyer in the media area with us. He's going to hopefully be working with us a ton at NBC Sports Boston this year. The Patriots' former quarterback really stressed to me that it's all run game with this kind of an offense. If you can establish the running game, that will open up the passing game. And we all understand that, but how, I asked Brian, what does that mean? How will it open things up? He said if a defensive line can stop your run game with 4 and the linebackers can play a step back and understand that the defensive line is going to slow people up and they can get the momentum to make stops at 2 or 3 yards downfield, well, that's great. You can leave 5 guys back in the secondary. If you're in a situation where you have to creep a safety up, well, then the numbers become more favorable. Right now, the Patriots are in a situation where if they can't run it, they're going to be seeing a lot of 2nd and 8s, and teams are not going to be threatened by the idea of, well, they'll be more threatened now than they were last year with Mack and Devontae Parker and Juju. They will.
Yes, they should be. They should be. And I don't want to make it sound like every run play was a bad run play. I'm just going through some of my notes right here. And what I'm finding interesting is that the plays where they attack up the gut, they actually seemed okay. I think they're still a gap-running team, and they have alluded to this, whether it's in some of these post-practice interviews that we have or things that I've heard, within the organization where it's just, they're still trying to figure out what best suits this personnel grouping when it comes to their run game, and I think they're going to come back to the gap stuff.
We had a couple rolling trash cans. I didn't want that to be a distraction to you, so I unceremoniously interrupted the center to my regrets. Gap run, do you think they're going to have to go back to that type of thing?
I think they might. Those seem like their best plays. And whether it's a true gap run, so it's, duo, double teams at the line of scrimmage, or power with a pulling guard, or if it's inside zone, which is, often a compliment to these teams that like to emphasize the wide zone or the outside zone. It seems to be that, and this would make sense, Tom, given the best players on their offensive line play in the middle of the formation.
Yep.
So run behind those guys. The wide zone stuff where a lot of these keepers and these boot actions that this type of offense is known for, they only work if you're able to really get a good, solid edge to your run game. And with the tackles you have, and even the tight ends, I would say, who are fine tight ends, Hunter Henry especially, they are not road grading, run blocking, dominant physical presence types of tight ends at the line of scrimmage. It's just not who they are.
Nor if you want to go ahead and try and pull your guards, who are your best blockers, Sidney So or Mike Onwenu, they are not exactly what we would call dancing bears to get out there and set the edge either. They're bigger players who are road graders as opposed to the other thing that isn't a road grader.
Thing. Yeah.
The dancing bear.
Right.
So there you have it. And it'll be interesting. Is that an outgrowth of the Patriots wanting to change to this offense, or saying, well, we've got Alex Van Pelt as our offensive coordinator, and that's what he does, so let's have him do that? Like, if Nick Caley was here, would they have altered the way that they were doing their scheme, do you think?
I'm not sure. I think you probably come in, if you're Alex Van Pelt, and saying to yourself, I like these certain types of runs. Let's try it.
Okay.
For long enough
and that's
to see if they can do it or not.
This
and if
could
they
still
can't
be trial
do it,
stage, too,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
Like this practice we're lamenting, there's very much trial stage.
I think they are starting to. It's late enough. I mean, we're 14 practices in. It's late enough that they should be settling on, okay, we tried the wide zone stuff in the spring. We tried it early in camp. This just might not be our game this year. Let's run more duo. Let's run more power, because when we run those, it looks like there's always space for us to run.
And duo and power for you guys. If you remember Damian Harris when he had his best year, all the touchdowns he had, it was an offense that was predicated on downhill running. And in 2022, there were glimpses of it in 2021 when they tried to run wide. Josh McDaniels wanted to alter the offense because it's an easier offense. It's more user-friendly to do the wide zone stuff because it opens things up for your quarterback. He doesn't have to make as many reads in the passing game if you are predicated on, okay, our throws are going to come off our runs in a particular way. Am I oversimplifying?
No, you're great. And I think it also helps your offensive line. If you want to throw, for example, 30 passes in a game, and you could get 5 that are moving pockets where the offensive line is faking as though it's running one of these wide zone plays and the quarterback is booting out, you basically are stealing 5 pass plays where your offensive line doesn't really have to pass protect. They're just selling the run, and they're running to the sideline, and you're hoping to get the entire defense to run with them while your quarterback is alone on an island going through his reads and making his throw. So there are plenty of reasons to favor that kind of offense, but if you can't get the runs going, it doesn't work. And I don't know if they have the personnel to get those types of runs going.
It's very much a body type thing. You know who could probably do it? Vidarian Lowe. Vidarian Lowe's build is thinner, a little smaller. He's pretty nimble. He's playing left tackle a lot. I don't know if a core of 4 would be better suited. We'll find out.
He might be. Cole Strange, like that. I think they drafted him with that idea in mind. Yeah.
So, be that as it may, how did Drake Maye look?
He did, to your point. He got fewer passing attempts. Now, some of these numbers are impacted by penalties. If there's a penalty, that I don't count it as a rep. Some are impacted by Drake Maye maybe handed off more than Jacoby Brissett. But in terms of the passing numbers, I'll give you, in competitive 11-on-11, Drake Maye went 4 for 7 with 8 sacks. Jacoby Brissett, to compare, went 10 for 20 with 7 sacks and 2 interceptions.
This isn't 11-on-11.
This is an 11-on-11.
15 sacks and 11-on-11.
And I would say
Tom Brady would go to week 10 before he had 15 sacks.
I mean, that's 15 sacks, and it's, you're not getting an attempt on those, but add 15 to 27, that's 42. 15 of 42. You're talking about a little less than half of their pass plays ended up being sacks in 11-on-11. 7-on-7, much better. I mean, Drake Maye's a star in 7-on-7. I'll say it. I mean, he's probably been their best 7-on-7 quarterback. I might even say that. As consistent as Jacoby Brissett's been, he doesn't have that many issues in 7-on-7. I have him 6 for 6, and he made what might have been the best pass of the practice that wasn't in one-on-ones down the sideline to Javon Baker. Great route by Baker, where he was able to hold the line. If you come to practice, and you won't be able to do this year because this is the last one that was open to the public, but if you come next year, you'll see these red lines that go almost down where the numbers would be on a normal football field, a little bit actually closer to the sideline. That's for receivers to understand, okay, this is what I want to make my track down the field, because I need to give the quarterback space between me and the sideline to lay the football in there. So if I can stack a defensive back behind me along this red line, now the quarterback has about 7 yards or so between the red line and the sideline to drop the ball in, and I should have space to run underneath it and keep my feet in bounds. So great job by Baker stacking his corner, staying down the line, and Maye making a great throw toward the sideline, sort of drifting Baker toward the sideline for what would have been a 35, 40-yard gain. Maybe their best pass play of the day for the Patriots, quite frankly.
Good chance for a quick verbiage check, because I'm sure that plenty of you know what stack means, but for those of you who don't, it's when a receiver gets a small step or even a shoulder on his defender. He's a little bit ahead of him, and he starts to veer in front of him. So the defender is now on the back. He's not even a half stride behind, but he is stacked behind the receiver, giving the receiver a clear avenue down the field over his shoulder in front of him. You want to get to a point as a receiver where you're stacked. Meanwhile, if you're a defensive back and the quarterback scrambles, what do you want to do, Phil?
You want to plaster in that situation, Tom. Yeah.
Plaster.
We've picked up a lot of good words over the course of time covering this team, huh?
Who was particularly heinous along the offensive line today?
The mistakes, I would say, were relatively spread out. Now,
Cal had a tough day.
Calvin Anderson had a difficult day blocking on Drake Maye's left side, his blind side. He was the left tackle for the second unit. I would say Micah Wenu and City So Both guys have had good camps. Both guys have been very solid across the board, pass game, run game. I thought today might have been their worst practice for each player individually. Talking about penalties, talking about missed assignments, losses in one-on-one situations. All three of those guys had their fair share. Chukwuefor, he didn't make the stock down column because he had a couple of positive blocks as well. But you could really point to almost everyone along the offensive line. Maybe aside from David Andrews, I didn't notice him really losing. But you could point to pretty much every guy on the top two units and find a couple of mistakes.
Okay. We're going to put a cork in this. I think you've probably heard enough. Those of you who remain, we appreciate you. You probably are just saying, I don't know if I need to hear that much more of this. We agree. What's going to happen is tomorrow is a day off, obviously, the day before a game, and then we're going to be back at it again with the Patriots preseason game. Phil, you doing radio color again?
I am doing radio color again.
All right, we will podcast after. We'll get you that hot off the presses, the Aftermath pod on Thursday night. Probably Friday morning is when it'll pop. But we'll have coverage the next couple days, things that we need to watch for. Watch for Drake Maye to play plenty in this Thursday preseason game. Phil's doing the thumb, Tom. I have one more thing.
No, I agree with you on that. I was just pointing. That was a cosign. Cosign. Listen to that guy. He knows what he's talking about. That guy right there, pointing to him with my thumb.
Even guys who've worked together for 13 years might have a miscommunication now and then. It's not all something to be panicked about.